If you're here clicking on this video, I'm sure you're already familiar with the game Rogue Lineage. 3 lives, bad progression system, ultra classes, I think you get the point. This rather niche game made by Monad Studios turned out to be quite popular amongst the teenage audience on the platform at the time. And considering that even before I played Rogue Lineage, I was still familiar with the concept of player versus player games, this game somehow made me believe it was actually good, which really isn't the case here. Rogue Lineage has probably invented the best form of stun-based combat I've ever played in a 3D environment. It's mainly the fact that Archmage and Ragusa were absolute boneheads when it came to coming up with the game in the first place, with everything revolving around the combat system basically being extremely miserable to interact with. However, the game did have lore and interesting locations, which for my autistic-ass 14-year-old self was a dream come true. Do you remember when Tal made a Joe Mama joke to the reader in his lore diary? Regardless, the original devs realized that they don't exactly want to work on a game with half a decade of programming and decided to dip from their project to make Deep Woken instead. I mean, I don't really blame them that much. I'm not one who knows much about coding. I can definitely see why they wanted to start anew after the travesty of Update Ultimate. A deep part of me still does wish that they'd hire some developers with their Deep Woken money to pick up the burnt remains of Rogue Lineage and make the game better. Rogue Lineage had so much more potential to become one of the best fighting games on the platform. And yes, while there technically still is one guy working on the game, the content patches are far and few between for this game to be somewhat sustainable. As of writing the script right now, Rogue Lineage currently only has 700 players, a fraction of what it used to get before Deep Woken. God, do I feel kinda bad for Grimkind. So, with a dead game, what's the way for it to still live on? Well, through the morally ambiguous method of stealing a game's source code and editing it yourself, the incredibly dedicated community of Rogue Lineage can make their own version of Rogue Lineage, new and improved. Alright, jokes aside, I would like to state that I don't support stealing Monad's assets to use in your own game. But at the same time, it seems like they actively neglect and don't care about the profits they make from this game. The only reason why I see rogue copies as being okay is because of the fact that the original Rogue Lineage is basically abandoned besides the very occasional minor content update. There are many examples of these games floating around, with some notable ones being Jujutsu Lineage, Rogue Lineage Battlegrounds, Rogue Arena, Antonius, Rogue Lineage Modded, Epsilon Lineage, you get the point. A thing I want to make clear is the fact that the original Rogue Lineage is objectively a terrible game, but not a bad fighting game. What do I mean by this, you may ask? Rogue Lineage's progression and permadeath system is really terrible. The main progression loop to getting to the endgame can be achieved by doing 3 main things: get experience, get silver, and get alignment. Naturally, you want to get these things done as soon as possible, so the quickest way to do them is by hitting zombie screams for an hour, server hopping in an area with tons of trinkets or using a blacksmith alt account, and finally grip an alt account 30 times, or get crunk and throw your alt account in the jail for killing your other alt account. All these things either involve just killing alt accounts or mind-numbing grinding. And if you don't have alt accounts, good luck trying to kill 30 people without wiping. Speaking of which, the permadeath completely fucks all of this over to an even higher degree. Rogue Lineage is a game which requires PvP to progress, which is a great concept if you don't lose heavy amounts of progress for just dying to another player once.
It's raining time.
And as for the people who are progressed at the top, they have access to instant map-wide traversal, which they can use the server hop incredibly efficiently and eat up all of the Phoenix Downs. This means that if you're fully progressed and at 1 life, you can just use another progressed alt account to grab Phoenix Downs for your other account, effectively making you unwipeable and completely nullifying an integral game mechanic. Imagine that if in Guilty Gear you tried to play a match with someone and lost, so now you have to win 10 rounds against a CPU in a row to get a Phoenix Down so you can fight people again. It's ridiculous! However, despite all these flaws, people still farm Phoenix Downs today just because of the combat at endgame, or they just play private servers instead. Because of this dilemma, people today are still Stockholm syndromed into playing an objectively bad game, myself included. And considering that the original game will probably never get a chance for these issues to get fixed, that leaves people like me to complain, and developers to steal the game's source code. With that all the way, there's generally 2 categories that come out of rogue copies. The ones that attempt to stay very close to the original Rogue and remove its permadeath, sometimes with minor balance changes, or the ones which attempt to get weird and innovate new ideas, completely changing the entire game in rare circumstances. I'll talk a little bit about the former category, as I think the latter one is way more interesting to talk about. Generally, rogue copies which try to stay similar to the source material are more populated by the sweaty and competitive side of the community. The people that play these games deeply love the complex combat of the original game and believe that the balancing of the original game is sacred, which it's most definitely not, but to each their own, I guess. At least to my knowledge, the most populated one of this category is Rogue Lineage Battlegrounds, which lets you select the classes from a more streamlined menu, but also lacks a lot of the content I'd wish to see. More spells and their snap variants, blacksmith, mages, they're all gone. Misogi and the Funny seem to take a scorched earth policy with balancing, just outright removing things that aren't fun instead of rebalancing them, which sucks, but it's not my game. All the balancing issues of the original game are still in place here, with Snap Snarvender doing way too much damage and instantly breaking Mana Shield, along with Blade Master, Fisher, Shinobis, and Macro Facelesses running around ready to one-combo anyone by just pressing a single button on the keyboard. Despite what I said, it's really just Rogue Lineage without lives, which is a humongous improvement which makes me want to play the game infinitely more than the real Rogue Lineage. I also really like the fact that you can make hybrids in this game, as they're kind of the last bastions of Rogue Lineage build experimentation that exist. Another game which takes this approach is Rogue Arena, which basically does the same thing as Rogue Lineage Battlegrounds, but instead rebalances the old classes and adds 5 new races, which would technically put this in the other category, but I don't care. Back in this game's heyday, you could actually get in the stock 1v1 matches with randoms, which was super cool for a Rogue Lineage game, but eventually the developers just decided to stop working on it. Nowadays, it's just the occasional group of 5 people fighting against their friends, and usually there's no randoms allowed. I actually remember being pissed drunk one time when this game was popular and gripping Agamatsu as an Abyss Walker while I was trying to stream the game, though I'm not really sure if I can find the original clip, but I'll try and see if I can look. Basically, a lot of the games in this genre are attempting to stick to the original combat and formula of Rogue Lineage, for the tryhards to play forever, and while there's nothing really wrong with that, a lot of these games make me want something more than just the original game, but without permadeath. I want to see the developers get weird with it, try and enhance the strengths and fix up the weaknesses of the original game. I want something more like Epsilon Lineage 2. Epsilon Lineage has recently came back into the spotlight again, with it being permanently at 0 players for a while until the developers have recently decided to add a new class and do a couple of in-game tournaments and balance changes. It's a very different game from Rogue Lineage just in the fact that almost every class has been completely overhauled from its original predecessor that have a similar theming, but completely different gameplay, along with completely new classes. It really is just its own thing. A lot of the new classes are incredibly fun, and you've got a ton of unique classes with different playstyles. A ton of the artifacts in the race pool have had both old things reworked and new ones added. The old blessing system from K has been added and expanded heavily, with most of them being comparable to Deep Woken talents, full of interesting passives such as being able to steal damage buffs from people or turn super armor into hyper armor. I also appreciate the increased time to kill. Fights against people will feel just the perfect length, where you aren't necessarily one-comboing the other person, but it also doesn't feel like both of you can tank several full combos. One of my favorite classes that I've been playing recently is Sentinel. It's a class which at surface value is slow and uses a hammer. When I first obtained this class, I questioned what the right-click variant of Shatter did, as it seems like it was impossible to hit anyone with this out of any other combo starters or my M1s, until I realized that it could hit through Ragdoll Execute and do a stupid amount of damage when you hit it. Eventually, I came to realize that you can also apply super armor to yourself for your next move and learn the class's true playstyle of applying super armor to punish over-aggressive opponents and capitalizing on their mistake by widening their butthole by at least 3 inches. Many of the classes in this game have an interesting learning process similar to the one I had detailed with Sentinel, and many of them do things that other classes can't, making learning each one an interesting and fun process. Assuming that you're okay with getting your butt kicked a few times while you're learning the ins and outs of your class, things start to click in your brain. Oh, wait a minute, I can access a guard break that teleports behind people when I mark them with my Shadow Orb. And my Thrown Daggers home in on people with the Mark II. And after a couple of these miniature revelations and maybe getting beat a couple of times, you fully understand your class's kit and begin to actually start winning fights against people. The enhanced build variety with more artifacts, enchants, and blessings allows for you to customize your build even further. My personal favorite blessing is the one which lets you transport an unlucky person of your choosing the 1v1 unit pocket dimension. Sometimes you get in there, other times you get in them, but regardless it gives a really cool set piece and prevents your opponent from running. The new enchants heavily reminded me of Dorkin Simulator's enchant system, except instead of it all being indirect ports of Deep Woken enchants, it's all original. You can do stuff like making your weapon damage be stored and applying it all at once in a burst, or you can give yourself extra damage when under a negative status effect. It's all quite cool stuff and only serves to increase the build variety the game offers, which is always going to be a big plus in my eyes. Epsilon Lineage is incredibly fun, but it definitely does have a lot of issues. The biggest glaring issue is that it's basically impossible for new players to get into the game without looking up the cello or joining the Discord server. And a lot of the things that Rogue Lineage players and copy developers take for granted is the fact that not everyone has played the original Rogue Lineage. When you first join the game, almost nothing is explained to you, just like its predecessor. A new player doesn't know how to farm silver, use gate, obtain a class. They'll just join and see everyone with these cool classes and no knowledge on how to obtain them, so they'll just leave. Another incredibly weird thing to me is how the game utilizes a base to super the ultra quote-unquote progression system when there isn't really any progression in the game at all. All you have to do to get ultra class is to look up the cryptic ass class locations using an outside resource and farm silver at Tundra 1 for 5 minutes. How the hell is a new player expected to know any of this? You can't even ask in game for help anymore thanks to Mr. Bazooki, so good luck trying to do that. The reason why the system of base, super, and ultra classes existed in Rogue Lineage was to introduce some form of progression and to allow for 2 super classes to be turned into a hybrid class, which both of these don't matter as you can't make hybrids in Epsilon and can get classes almost instantly. So my only question to this is what the hell is the point of even having this system in the first place? It'd be way better to add some sort of fighting game character select menu when you wipe, which would make things a whole lot easier for new players trying to get into the game and save everyone the headache of looking up class locations and farming silver. Another thing that I don't like is the fact that a lot of the cosmetics require silver. And while it's really easy to farm, farming silver is just about as fun as it is to farm in real Rogue Lineage. Why can't these just be unlocked through getting grips instead? Just add a new currency called, like, cosmetic tokens or something, make them cost 5 cosmetic tokens and you get 1 token per grip. People would probably use alt accounts to farm these tokens, but maybe you can limit it to like a 24-hour cosmetic token cooldown per person or something. I don't know, I'm not a developer. Also, please make it so Shrieker just requires the Shrieker heart to get it. Farming 50,000 silver is absolutely absurd, and I would not wish that fate on anyone. Remember when I was talking about the increased artifact pool earlier? Well, that came at a cost. Artifacts in Rogue Lineage have always been kind of a strange conundrum. In the original game, they entirely relied on RNG to be obtained and gave those lucky enough to get one a new passive, which isn't the greatest thing. While Epsilon makes artifacts accessible to the average player, the 2 ways to obtain them are incredibly boring. Epsilon replaced Castle Rock entirely with a new dungeon. It places you against an NPC enemy, and after killing them, this is how you complete it. Seems pretty underwhelming, right? Well, the artifacts you obtain from this are basically RNG related, meaning that you'll have to just repeat beating this poor green DSK over and over again and praying to God that you get the artifact you want for your build. You can also go to this cryptic ass place to reroll artifacts for silver, and I've already explained why making things based on silver is terrible. Finally, the game has lives, which are bad because in modern fighting game design, they attempt to make loss not feel like shit. They do this through tutorials, matching you against people of a similar skill level, access the training modes, and not heavily penalizing people for losing a match, which is exactly what this feature does. But here's the thing, the lives feature doesn't even matter because the Phoenix down rates have been jacked up to infinity. So what I ask is, what's the point of this feature existing in the first place? Like, the only thing that this does is wipe new players who weren't told about the mechanic and force you to go take the 5-minute PD search of shame every time you've lost a match. The time it takes for you to look for PDs increases with the server size, so sometimes I have to go to a different server to get one and head back to the original server, which is so stupid. The only thing I want to do is just be able to fight people immediately after I lose. Is that so much to ask? And despite all my complaining on Epsilon, I really do still like the game. The completely different lineup of classes and satisfying combat still keep me coming back even with these current issues in place. And I'm also saying all this because I love this game and I want it to see it be better than in its current state. Also, adding keybinds would be a huge quality of life feature, but I already know they might be working on that. And if you saw the title of this video, you're probably still wondering why I think you should check out these games. At the end of the day, all these games are labors of love from the Rogue Lineage community that keep their abandoned games still kicking after 6 years of this game's existence. Literal fragments of Monad Studios' flawed but lovable projects still exist in the code and assets used of these games, some with more fragments than others. And considering that the original game has been basically abandoned by Monad Studios, it's ultimately up to the community to still keep it playable by people today. And now, thanks to the efforts of copy developers, Rogue Lineage has been transcended from the hands of the developers and has been given back to the community for them to tinker on. They improved what made the original game so fun for us 5 years ago while also removing the boring aspects of Rogue Lineage. I think that effort is incredibly commendable, and I also think you should go play these super niche games, try to learn them, and support the developers and participate in the community, no matter how toxic it is. All these games will be in the description if you'd like to play them. I sadly have to recommend finding a Trello or guide of some sort if you fully want to enjoy them, but I also hope that in the future these games will no longer require one.
Montag lieben, glauben, globen.
Don't like me? That's okay. Bye. Oh you.
Whoa, look at that girl.
Like you cut G.